First, and this is really personal for me, I wish clergy weren't always framed in this way. Clergy must be able to discuss difficult biblical passages. We must be able to confront the discrepancies and explore the mysteries and provide hope in the midst of all that tension. Second, I would love to sit down with the writers of this series and say, hey, not all Christians think like that. Some of us don't have problems with evolution. Some of us have reconciled the difference between fact and faith, or science and faith. But that debate and that conflict still persists in our world today. Both really drive us to ask, how do we differentiate truth from faith, and what impact does that have? In our world today, we have what philosopher Francis Schaeffer calls this two-system theory of truth. We put faith and values and convictions here, and we put science and fact here. Our truth is not unified. I would word it a little differently. I would say we put our faith over here on Sunday, and we live the rest of our lives over here, the two never meeting, which when you think about it is really problematic. There's a disconnect when we do this. I'm not saying we shouldn't confront the ridiculousness of creationism. The earth was not created 6,000 years ago. Darwin was both a Christian and an evolutionist. But we often do compartmentalize our faith, and there is an impact on the way we live our lives. We have accepted this dichotomy, this stance between faith and fact. We've accepted it with science. We've accepted it with our ethics, which are situational and not consistent. We've accepted it with our ideologies and our politics. We have accepted it with some of the greatest social struggles of our world today. We take addicts to recovery and we don't offer them also the gospel. We take homeless to the warming shelter and we don't also offer them community. Now, I'm perfectly okay not having everything figured out, but there are times in our faith that we can use a little bit more logic, and there are times with our facts that could use a little more faith. I think Paul's argument in Corinthians is especially important. Paul's writing to a community that has begun to separate their faith from their daily lives. They're living under Roman occupation, and it has become difficult to live into the value and the way of Christ. And in this section we read from today, Paul is arguing for the resurrection of Jesus. And Paul remarks, if the resurrection did not occur, then our faith is worthless. And then he lists all the people who witnessed the risen Christ. Some Paul would have known, like Peter, 70 years later. Christianity has to be more than a warm and fuzzy experience. It is founded in history. It can be discussed and debated, and Paul doesn't ask us to believe blindly. He puts the weight of Christianity on the backs of the eyewitnesses. But the truth is, it's 2,000 years after Paul, and we only have this oral story that was written down 70 years after it happened as our evidence. We don't have eyewitnesses. We don't have anyone to tell us what happened. We only have blind faith. And Paul never thought that he would exist, that we would exist, that this thing called Christianity would exist after his lifetime. So what are we left with? We're left with our logic. And maybe our head and maybe our heart aren't as far apart as we think.